Good morning, and thank God it's Friday, another Friday, another end of a measured time span. It's Friday. I want to take time out to say hello to the Wilby's family, specifically Owen Wilby, Aston Wilby, and immediate families. I want to say condolences for the passing. My condolences to the family on the passing of their sister Arlene, someone I've known for several years. I hope that in this time of grief, your faith would allow for consolation. This Friday talk is brought to you by Ivanetti After School and Tutoring Services, the place where education or knowledge is the only way to be guarded in the things we do. I want to talk a bit on learning as opposed to regurgitating, because sometimes we do get these things confused. You know, there are times when we do things because we memorize things. You know, we keep on doing the same thing over and over, but we do not understand exactly what's going on in the background. And that's the reason why, you know, I always allude to the fact that, you know, education has this staircase effect. We go from bottom up, not from top down. So we learn fundamentals, foundation, and we use the foundation in grasping or understanding what is being taught to us. We cannot, I always say, we cannot be at the top and have full understanding or any understanding of what we do, even if we have been given the opportunity to follow some procedures, some process, and do it over and over again. That's regurgitation. Learning is knowing what's going on, not a recital. You know, there are times I would hear people say that, oh, this person is a good driver, or, you know, a good technician, or a great, whatever his trait may be. But yet that person is unable to explain anything, one thing about what he or she is doing. So that's grounded in regurgitation. That's not learning. That's grounded in regurgitation. You cannot be anything or anything of value within, well, I cannot say value because people have lived on regurgitating over time, but you cannot have great understanding or any understanding of what you're doing when you're working on the premise of regurgitating. You know, I've seen that in my work life. I've seen that, you know, the simple in conversation, people will, or some will just say, oh, I am this, or I am proficient in this, and, you know, I can handle this. But if there is any kind of deviation, any kind of difference in the path, then, you know, there are problems. You know, I remember I may have said this, some people may have heard me said this already, but I remember remember I was at a graduation years ago in Massachusetts, and one of my son was graduating from MIT, and one of the professors gave us a story about regurgitation and as opposed to learning. Well, it sounded that way to me. You know, that wasn't the topic, but he was one of the he was one of the speech delivery person. So he said, you know, learning is not just seeing the same thing over and over and being able to capture and rebroadcast. And he gave this what was I saying? Oh, he gave this example of this professor who had a driver, and they would go around giving basically the same speech. The professor would give the same speech wherever he goes, and it was highly mathematical, highly, you know, riddled with engineering concepts and everything. And after a while, his driver was so good at repeating that he decided on asking the driver, especially when he was tired, to do the speech at times, because he knew it line by line. Anyway, at one time he was at this graduation, and when he went up there and started, you know, his repetitious acts, one person got up in the audience, an audience member said, "So how do you explain this?" So that was one person with some knowledge of the topic that he was talking about. And being stumped, the only thing that he could have done was to say, "Well, that question is so simple, I'll ask my driver to explain." So he shuffled his way out of it, yes, but at the same time, it's just an example of how learned he was. Although he was fluently repeating the information that he had heard several times over, the concept was not grasped. So there was no explanation. He had no explanation in doing what he was doing. But what was lacking here? What was lacking here? You cannot grasp a concept unless you have the foundation for grasping. In that case, it was, you know, an engineering concept, mathematical concept, physical concept, and the driver did not have the background of the math, the background of the physics, the background of anything in order to make that delivery. But yet, if I pull back a bit, but yet he was able to repeat whatever the other person was doing. So, you know, that in itself shows, you know, although it may be a myth, you know, that in itself shows that, you know, you may be able to say things, do things, of course, but is that are you doing it through learning, or you're doing it through regurgitation? And you know, it's left up to, of course, some people will never understand the difference because because the results are there to show to some audience that they understand, not every audience, that they understand, they will move on, even themselves, thinking that they have great knowledge of the craft. I would like to say that with preparation, with the right attitude, and all the fundamentals, if not our majority of the fundamentals, we're like sponges. We soak up information based on our knowledge. That's it. Information will always be soaked up based on our knowledge. You could put 1 million people you could have an audience of 1 million, but yet only 2 or 3 people may understand fully what you're saying. Why? Because those 2 or 3 people are ready. There is readiness among those 3 people. They can relate to whatever is being portrayed, whatever is being delivered. They can relate to that, and as long as you can relate, then of course you'll soak up and understand the information. But again, if that same speech is given over and over, some people will even tape the speech, and if it's taped and it's recited, then it will become second nature. The recitation itself, not understanding. The recitation, the regurgitation, let me say regurgitation. It's not the regurgitation will become second nature. But we have to be ready. We have to be ready to understand. We have to be ready to understand, and that's the reason for school. We have to study. We cannot be of a certain craft or a certain practice. We cannot be practitioners unless the fundamentals are in place. No matter what you think, it's not possible for you to be practitioners unless the fundamentals are in place. That would be scary. That would be very scary for me. I wouldn't want a person who bases his craft on, or her craft on, regurgitating information to be putting up a bridge for me. No. I wouldn't want a person who does not know the basic difference between milliliters, grams, milligrams, and things of that sort to be administering medicine to me. I would not want a person who has no concept of the physical concept of the physical operations or design of a motor vehicle to design one for me, and then I'll be driving. Obviously, the structural engineer for the bridge, I wouldn't want to be riding over that bridge. The guy who put up the scaffolding, design the scaffolding, I wouldn't want that guy to design a scaffold for me, because there is a relationship between the strength, the the different forces that may be involved with, based on height and even atmospheric pressure have to be taken in consideration. So how can you do a design that is of, I would say, sufficient care, sufficient protection, when you have no knowledge of the basics? And I could go on and cite several examples, and but I hope those who are of course, again, an audience is an audience. Sometimes what you say may just go slide off, without any understanding. But preparation, I'll go back by saying preparation is the important aspect of understanding along the trail, understanding along the path. And if your intentions are to go along some path that allude to educational concepts, then on each step of the way, understanding has to be the main or the key features. Again, on behalf of Ivanetti After School and Tutoring Services, I'll say thank God it's Friday, and I hope we all are on par with our plans for 2019 and beyond. Ivanetti After School and Tutoring Services. I may be reached at 914-447-1819. Again, Ivanetti After School and Tutoring Services, 914-447-1819. The place where education is a premium. Thank you.